She's the top originator for loans at Fairway, as well as being the #1 originator in the state of Colorado. So she's done a tremendous job of building an awesome business over there. She's extremely active in DMAR's Market Trends Committee. In fact, she's the title sponsor for Market Trends, and she owns 24 real estate investments and is passionate about helping others build wealth through real estate. So Nicole, thank you so much for being our sponsor again and for being our MC today. So we look forward to having you take us through. So I'll turn it right over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm already having a lot of fun. We've got a great speaker lineup. I'm going to start out with a quick presentation that's going to kick us off. I have such fun with my little bit. I try to stay away from necessarily the economy section because that is well covered during our time together, but to rethink or maybe refocus kind of what we're doing. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm super excited because what an incredible day this is going to be. So first off, thank you to all the speakers who we're going to have the pleasure of being with today. So much to learn. What an incredible lineup. It's an honor, a privilege to be here again this year. And we did it, right? Like it's officially 2021. I almost keep saying 2020, like I'm not quite all the way there yet, but we made it. So, and the score is 0-0. We get a do-over. We get the reset button. 2020 and all of its lessons, hardships, tragedy, and yes, even successes are now behind us. We have this blank page in front of us to write out whatever story we can dream up, the kind of life we want to lead, the business we want to run, the people we want to serve. This week, this month, even this event, which I love so much, symbolizes the kickoff of something new. So what do we do with that? It has been said that to those whom much is given, much is required. And for those of us in the real estate business, we all have to admit, much has been given. The circumstances of 2020 gave rise to a new meaning of the word home. Home became our refuge, our safety, our office, our school, our restaurant, our gym. It became everything to everyone. Demographics were predestined long before 2020 came to impact the market with the largest age cohort right now at 28 to 30 years old, just on the precipice of buying their first homes. The Fed's monetary policy, which was intended to brace us against the effects of a recession, added to the buying frenzy, pushing the equity markets to new record highs and dropping mortgage rates to new lows 16 times in 2020. The equity market exuberance combined with the low interest rates continue to allow buyers to bid over asking and increase their purchasing power, which in turn gave fuel to the accelerating appreciation we've seen in this hot seller's market. Sellers' trepidation to allow people to enter their homes not only exacerbated our already tight existing home inventory issue, but then had builders selling off any of their existing inventory and putting reservation on future projects. But that's just the beginning. It doesn't even start to touch the surface of the true experience of 2020, nor the opportunities in front of us in 2021. This is where you come in, right? Your clients, your sphere have more questions than answers. They're searching for a way to protect their family, to secure their financial stability, and to live joyfully and abundantly. And you have some of those answers that they're seeking. Do you know that 80% of Americans have over 62% of their total net worth wrapped up in their primary home? Everyone thinks that they can ride the stock market right now, this craze that's going on to get wealthy. But that same group, that 80% of Americans only own 6.8% of the stocks. It's the top 1% who are getting wealthier. Buyers today are skewed to first-time homebuyer millennials. Our buyers are also 2/3 minorities. Interest rates are keeping monthly payments down for the moment, but rising prices will continue to make it harder to make necessary down payments. So what are we doing to help them? To research, to educate them on their options, to partner with them as advisors, champions, and advocates. This year, be passionate to give away more than you receive, to ask all the hard questions so that they don't have to. Take every opportunity to light up the path to financial stability and opportunity that real estate provides. There are so many things that I wake up every single day grateful for. And that's one of the things I do that starts out every day, is write out my gratitudes. But this time, this event, this ability, this is probably the biggest. I've had the pleasure of serving you, my real estate partners, and my clients through the power of building wealth through real estate. This year in 2020, my team had the blessing of educating over 1,600 agents in our Agent Ignite series, inspiring over 900 clients and realtors to purchase their first investment property through our Investment Empire series. We asked the hard questions with over 4,500 of you through our Market Trends series, and supported 758 families in choosing their best loan product to support their financial success. So today, this event marks the opportunity to start at zero again, right? Right now, we have to set our eyes on impacting the lives of one human, one family at a time. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to get started. So we've got an incredible speaker lineup getting kicked off right now. But first, a CE reminder, as we've done and Mike did with the setup, keep your eyes on the prize, screen. Make sure that we can see you, because that's how we give you the CE credit. We're also going to have some pop-ups. Make sure to answer those when Sarah does that. That's part of the CE process. It's not to actually test your ability, but to make sure that you're still here with us. And we just want to make sure that you do get that. So I have the good pleasure of introducing Andrew Abrams. So Andrew's been a realtor for over 10 years. While he got to start helping investors find fix and flips, he has since helped negotiate over 250 deals with his buyers and his sellers. He's currently the employing broker at BSW Real Estate. While he got his start outside of his business, he has held various volunteer positions within DMAR in the city of Denver to help protect property rights and home ownership. He previously served as the chair of the Government Affairs Committee and sat on Denver's Affordable Housing Task Force and Blueprint Denver. Currently, he's on Denver's Planning Board as well as the chair of DMAR's Market Trends Committee. It is through the committee that I've had the pleasure of spending considerable time with Andrew, teaching the Market Trends class, Warning Graphic Images. Make sure to sign up. We've got one next week. And debating exactly on how we define affordability and months of inventory. And on those, we will agree to disagree. But if I agreed with Andrew, we'd both be wrong. So Andrew Abrams, with that, I'm going to let you take over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. I am so excited to be here. We're here, guys. It is 2021. Things are going to be different. I'm sure of it. I'm going to wear pants to my Zoom meetings. I'm going to make really good eye contact. Yes, you in the upper left-hand corner. I'm looking at you. My favorite part of that is about half of you definitely just looked in your upper left-hand corner, possibly even made eye contact. So we're here, and I am so excited to talk about the market trend stats and kind of just what happened in 2020. But I actually think I'm going to go off script a little bit here and kind of tell you the story of what actually, allowed me the opportunity to present you guys, because I think it is a great metaphor for kind of what 2020 and probably 2021 is going to feel like. So when I first got into real estate, my mentor said, hey, just get on a committee with DMAR. You be around other professionals, it will help you learn what to do. So I joined the Government Affairs Committee, and the first year, I didn't even say a word. I stood behind really smart people, and I just tried to learn acronyms because there are so many acronyms. And so then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna try to run for a chair position. I ran for vice chair and I lost. I did not get elected, and 3 months later, the guy I lost to, he quit. And they said, Andrew, we don't have anyone else. Can you come in and step up? And I said, absolutely, that sounds great. So as vice chair, then I turned into the chair, and I got to fight on behalf of DMAR and realtors for great initiatives, right? Like property rights, hostile designation, condo construction defects, and even signage. The reason why some of your open house signs don't get thrown away is because that's what we worked with on the Government Affairs Committee and through RPAC. So then I reached out to a member on the Market Trends Committee and I said, hey, how do you get on this thing? And they said, hey, you know what? We need a policy guy. Why don't you come and join us? I said, that's great. So I kind of, got in the door that way, ran to be chair of the Market Trends Committee, and it came down to a tied vote. And so sure enough, we flipped a coin. And one of the biggest lessons is tails never fails. So I am sitting today because honestly, I just got lucky. And I think that is so true for 2020 is everyone has a script and this idea of how success is going to look and how we want, a process to work. Hey, we're going to incrementally work hard and things are going to come our way. And while that's great and certainly happens to some people, that's not true for most people, right? It's one of those things that, hey, we put a lot of effort out there. Things often don't work out, but when that opportunity presents itself, can you take advantage of it? And so I think it's kind of been a feeling of what I've been feeling over the last week. And I just kind of wanted to share my story because sometimes when you get an opportunity to speak to 600 other realtors, it's really intimidating and it feels like, oh man, how did you get there? And I got there honestly by taking the luck and opportunity that was given and kind of getting after it. So that is my story. And now we're going to jump into the actual market trends and what 2020 looked like. So I'm guessing I have to share my screen first. And then, all right. Let's see if we can get on presenter view. All right. So what happened in 2020? Other than hindsight and the coronavirus, we had a few records that were broken. So as the chair of DMAR, Market Trends, what we do, we have this class, we have this great market trends report on kind of like a tool for all of you to use. And one of the things that I love the most about real estate is you can really individualize it to yourself. I like the numbers, so I like to dig in. I've seen people walk into houses and say, oh my goodness, I just love this. This just looks beautiful. Look at these amenities, look at this character. And all of that is fantastic. And you can do it your own way. And so the thing I would say to take from this is make this your own. I will highlight certain numbers and stats that I just find fascinating, but that's a me thing. You need to find a you thing and kind of make it your own and get your elevator speech down, because you can pick up a lot of clients and have a lot of opportunity to sound like the expert just from knowing certain components of the market. And then when you go with your clients, you can kind of hone in from there. So we get the data from RE Colorado. We pull it on the first of every month. And one of the keys is consistency in our methodology. That is so important. So we have that consistent information come out. We cover the 11 counties, which is Adams, Arapahoe, Boulder, Broomfield, Clear Creek, Denver, Douglas, Elbert, Gilbert, and Jefferson and Park County. Definitely have all of those memorized and did not just read off the screen. Likewise, too, when you go to the DMAR Realtors and the market trends, you can also focus in on different county and city reports that provide great information to all of your clients. Again, I'm a volunteer. These are all just great opportunities for you to market yourself and put yourself up. So, likewise, too, you need to keep the DMAR logo, the watermark, the sourcing, but it is an amazing opportunity. And so a lot of people use an infographic like this to market themselves, and that's great. That's why we're here. And so we have unbelievable market trends committee members who provide great support. I do have to specifically call out one, Steve Danilwin and Danilwin and Associates. He would hate that I am actually calling him out, but he's the one that provides so much value and specific information, most of which I'll be presenting on. And so I just wanted to take a second to personally thank you, because I don't know what I would talk about if you didn't provide and put together such great information. So let's jump on to those records breaking. Over December, just for compared to all other Decembers, we saw records being broken in many different areas, right? Average close price, median close price, days in the MLS, both average and median, close price, and pendings. We've kind of seen this, and every time I had an opportunity to present and talk about it, every month for probably the last 4 months, it was kind of the same note. Hey, we're seeing continued low inventory and a lot of purchasing. And so I will talk about that and kind of how that translates. But I think the one thing that shows on why you've kind of heard the same thing 4 months in a row is because of that seasonality and trends that are relatively consistent. Likewise, we set all-time records. right? We've never had active listings under 3,000. We're a little bit over 2,500. I don't have it up here, but there were over 63,000 or almost 63,000 houses purchased in 2020. And so I will highlight that in a bit, but I think these numbers can be very intimidating because it's a lot. It's a lot of numbers, but just remember, these numbers are actually just the consequence of the stories that are being told. So anytime you read something, I really would try to push you, take a step back for just 1 second and think, what is this story behind these numbers? So if inventory is so low where we're at just that little over 2,500, that probably means there are more buyers per listing, and I will actually show that. And that means more competition. And so then you have to start thinking, okay, well, is competition, how are we going to compete to try to get our clients in and pick up clients? So the market trends report as a whole has 29 total pages. We have 19 pages of charts and graphs, and then we also focus in on different price points, 300 to 500, 500 to 750, 750 to $1 million, and over $1 million. This page is the second page of the market trends report and is one of my favorites. So if I were to highlight kind of 3 pages, this is certainly one of them. And if you do it every single month, you're going to get a really good idea of what's going on in the market. So you can see, again, we're just a little over 2,500 houses on the market. Compared to last month, that's 25% less. And compared to last year at this time, that's 50% less. Likewise, too, you can focus on the detached and attached. So in the detached market, there was a little over 1,300 houses on the market. Out of those, 400 of them was over $1 million. If you actually think about that, you can think, okay, things are getting more expensive, but almost a third of our market for single family detached properties are over $1 million. So it's hard, it's tough out there. And I think it's like, when I translate that number in my head, I think, oh my goodness, right? Like that's the first one. That's not a productive thought, but that is what I'm thinking. And then I think, okay, well, how do I use this? How am I using this to help protect my clients? Well, probably when I first sit down with them, setting those realistic expectations of what competition looks like and what an offer looks like. Because most people have these preconceived notions of, cool, I'm going to see a house a few times. And you know what? I'm not going to be pushed out in my 30-minute time window or even 15 minutes because I'm going to get to look and see it more than once and then decide and sleep on it and make the biggest investment of my life in a very nice and controlled way. And we know right now that's simply not the case. It is a, hey, it hits the market, let's go see it, let's waive a whole bunch of rights and hope we get it compared to the 20 other offers. One of the other pages I look at, so this is page number 2, this is overall our market insights, but in the bottom right corner, which I've highlighted, is the quick stats. I love this. And I love this because people like to use the B word, right? Like the bubble. Are we in a bubble? What's happening? And so house prices are supply and demand. Very simplistically, that's what they are. So if we're a little over 2,500 houses on the market and the average active listings in December is close to 13,000, we're quite a bit below the average. And compared to 2007, where there was 24,000 houses, more than 24,000 active listings, what that's really telling you is, okay, we're nowhere near that. And it's going to take a lot to get more inventory. You know, if you knock down a small house and put in a big house, that's the same amount of inventory. People love to talk about the duplexes that are coming in. Even if that is true, you know, taking one house and making it 2 is not necessarily impacting the inventory that much. So throughout the report, I give my expert opinion, which is an overview of the market as a whole. And likewise, too, we have our expert opinions throughout different price points that focus in on different areas. So again, you can use this. Hey, if you have a listing coming up and it's in this, utilize this report. So as I said, you know, along with that first page, we have that data snapshot of, okay, we had 2,500 houses on the market. Last year at this time, we had over 5,000. We're at like that 50%. I always like to use median as kind of my focus. So what is the median close price for the market, both single family and attached? 460. And one of the things I like to utilize too when I'm working with buyers is that close price to list price is over 100%. And again, I think, you know, people just naturally come in, hey, I looked at a website and I think my house or a house is worth this. So if I'm approved for 500,000, let's start looking at houses priced at 500,000 that hit the market day 1. That sounds great. Most likely that's going above asking, and I can actually show it to you here because that 100.36% is that close price to list price, which is going to show you, hey, most things are going above asking. So you might want to start off below the top of your range, so that way you can go above asking price. We have the year-to-date stats as well, which kind of shows in the last 5 years. So the thing that I love to focus on here, we've never seen house or more purchases than last year. So everyone talks about, oh man, there's only a little over 2,500 houses on the market. I think I've said it like 12 times so far. But what that means is at the end of the month, that's how many active listings there are. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a lot of houses necessarily hitting on the market or that people are not doing deals. And that's true because we've never seen over 60,000 houses purchased, and we saw almost 63,000. So what was happening was attrition. We were putting things on the market and buyers were buying. We purchased over $33 billion of houses throughout that greater Denver metro area. One of the agents that I work with and respect greatly, he says,
Andrew, your voice went away.
Lost your audio, Andrew.
He clearly lost his speaker too because he doesn't know. Andrew, oh shoot.
Everyone start waving.
for home ownership is going so well.
You lost your audio. Andrew, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. That last segment we lost.
Sounds good. I wasn't sure if you were laughing at whatever. Okay. All right. So we're back. So glad we lost our audio. Real quick, all I was saying was that now is the best time to buy, which also is making it the hardest time to buy. And that is why we are seeing so many buyers in the market, along with obviously low interest rates. So when we talk about that months of inventory, it's basically what we're doing is essentially dividing the actives by close. And so when I look at that single family detached between 400 and 500,000, that to me is the most remarkable number. I've heard people talk about months of inventory. We kind of describe a neutral market as 4 to 6 months. There is no price point and no market right now, attached or detached, that is a buyer's market. But 400 to 500,000 in that single family detached range is 5.4 days of inventory. So in theory, if no one put a house on the market for a week, we would have no more houses to sell in that price point. So it is hyper competitive. And we do have to, again, continue to think creatively on how we're going to set our clients up for success. This is kind of that third page that I love in the market trends report, because I think it just shows so much. For one, you can kind of see the ebbs and flows, the mountains here. And what that is showing is that there's seasonality in the market. There is that up and down. The other, again, we're talking about supply and demand and the relationship between those, and that active listing and sold listing. You can see how things have changed. And I'll even show that on the next slide as well. But you can see that those active listings continue to drop while the amount purchased is actually going up. And so I think this graph shows a lot. And here is one of the new graphs that we've seen. Again, thank you, Steve. And to me, this is incredible, showing our population and how it's changed. So 1985, which was a great year because some of us were born then, has almost doubled since, or 2019, almost doubled. So our population, not quite, but pretty close to doubled. Likewise, the total housing units going from 780,000 to 1.4 million today-ish, a little less than that. Again, almost doubled. So proportionally, I actually looked. And so per person per household in 1985 was like 2.36 people. Now it's 2.42. So the proportion of it actually has not changed that much. But if you look at the actives, or the last column, the number of housing units for every active listing, it's gone up drastically. So again, 1985, there was 45 housing units for every active listing. Now there's 544. It doubled from even just last year. And so again, why are we thinking, oh man, why is this such a competitive market? Well, there are simply less houses available for the housing units that are actually out there. So you could probably extrapolate that to, there's going to be a general percentage of housing units that are always looking to buy and sell. And so right now it is just more competitive than it has ever been. And again, that is why knowing this market, knowing what to do is so important. That active inventory as a whole and kind of the ebbs and flows throughout the year and what it looks like. So again, we're at that low inventory and then the closing by year. And I think those things have a lot to do with each other, right? We see more houses purchased, pretty similar amount of houses actually put on the market, which is why we ended with less to show. And because of that, there's that supply and demand ratio. So we see this appreciation, and I'll talk about appreciation and what an opportunity it is for homeowners and kind of using leverage to build wealth. But you can see that average close price has gone up quite a bit. And likewise too, that closed dollar volume, we ended this year over $33 billion. And I just want to say that as much as possible, because who doesn't like to talk about billions of dollars? And the last one too is months of inventory. Again, that 4 to 6 months is considered a neutral market. And the one thing I would push for a little bit when I talk about months of inventory is not to focus as much on the number, but on the relationship compared to the previous year, because I think that kind of flows with the trends of how things are going. So if we see an increase in months of inventory like we did from 2017 to 2019, even though it's still technically very strong sellers market, that shift did allow some buyers to actually start negotiating some inspection items. Some shifts, I think, is more about kind of that mentality and feel that people are actually feeling, which is, I think what I personally like to focus on is, again, that story behind it. So my, second to last slide here is talking about appreciation. So since 1990, over the last 30 years, I'm sure this year, when we include 2020 in this graph, it's going to be over 6%. So everyone talks about, oh man, is housing a good investment? Are we at the top? Well, we can show over the last 30 years. Let's not hyper focus on a short amount of time. 30 years is a long time. And it shows that appreciation year over year. I don't understand stocks and bonds a lot, but I know people talk about compound interest. This is compound interest. This is one of those tools that you can use to build wealth. So just, my hypothetical is, we've seen rates be generally under 3%, but let's call it 3% right now. So if you're buying a house for $500,000, you're putting $100,000 down at 3% interest rate. So a lender is giving you $400,000 and you have to pay them 3%, but you're getting 6% back. So you are making 3% on someone giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not to mention, the appreciation as a whole, how that compounds, all the tax write-off, and the fact that you get to be in your house and control your own destiny. So these are all those tools that are used to help you, to help your elevator speech and help you control your own destiny. So I never know how to end these things, but what better way than with a smiley face?
Well, that was brilliant. Andrew, and I love how you kind of went through the market trends report, which everybody gets on a monthly basis. So really what a great way to be able to break that down for everybody to kind of understand how to capitalize on that information. And one of the numbers that you were talking about when you were talking about the households and the population that Steve had found that website for us for, one of the numbers that stood out to me was that there's 544 homes for every one that's for sale. And I was speaking with my husband and I was telling him the visual on that for me is I have to drive down the street past 544 homes before I see a for sale sign. That's intense. And that visual helps our buyers understand, your buyers, my borrowers, right? Understand how big the inventory shortage is, because it's easy to say we have a shortage of inventory. But when you put it like that, or you say that there's 10 homes in all of Highlands Ranch, as Jill Schaefer had pointed out on 12/31, that's significant. So really just capitalizing on this information to help you have conversation with your buyers and with your sellers and helping them to take action really is what this is all about. I get to introduce our next speaker. So Patty Silverstein and I have had several conversations. I've watched her present over the years, just a dynamic woman with an incredible wealth of knowledge. And the fact that she's so willing to share that with us is a blessing. She takes a lot of pride and gets excited to do these presentations. So I'm excited to have her share that with you. So let me tell you a little bit about Patty. She is the president and chief economist of Development Research Partners, a Jefferson County, Colorado-based real estate analysis and economic development research company. So count how many times I say economics. In addition, she serves as the consulting chief economist for the Metro Denver Economic Development.
Nicole, can I interrupt you for 1 second? It's Sarah Good. We actually have Kelly speaking next and then Patty.
Oh my gosh, Patty, I'm so sorry.
But
I set you up for a fantastic talk.
That's okay. I was going to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure.
I had so many good things to say. So
I'll be back with you in a few minutes, though.
Sarah, thank you. All right. Well, equally as impressive. So my apologies, Kelly. I did not mean to take some spotlight away. She is also an incredibly wonderful woman who, Kelly Bruff. So the last name. So she's, I want to share with you because what a remarkable resume. Kelly has done some incredible things and been that first woman to really create change in the areas where she was present and really made a difference. So I'd like to introduce Kelly. She is a career of first. She was the first woman to plow snow at Denver's original international airport, AKA Stapleton. Right? The first woman to serve as director of the City of Denver's Human Resource Department, and the first woman to be president and CEO of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, where she is today. Kelly has spent her career maximizing the success of public and private companies to help deliver great jobs, which is truly her passion. As a chief of staff and in other roles for the city of Denver, Kelly oversaw a general fund of $857 million and over 10,000 employees. She implemented the new 311 customer service system, created the city's first CFO position, negotiated pay and benefits with 3 unions, and negotiated and managed some of the city's largest contracts. And if that's not impressive enough, which it is, if that's not impressive enough, she also thru-hiked the Colorado Trail in 34 days, walking 498 miles and climbed 90,000 vertical feet from Denver to Durango. Now that's a true Coloradoan. Kelly?
Thanks, Nicole. What you all really picked up there is I can't hold down a job. It is great to be here with you. I think I loved the stats you've heard so far. I'm going to try to give you a range of statistics. Nicole started this morning by saying, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. The one thing I can tell you, anybody trying to predict the future, I just can guarantee they will be wrong. None of us are going to hit the mark on this one. And I'm going to share these stats because I think they'll give you some insight into how different some of our statistics point in different directions, making it very hard to find trend lines and be able to figure out where we're heading. I want to start, though, by sharing a little bit of history. 153 years ago is when the chamber was formed. And I think it's relevant why we came into existence. And what happened is there was a transcontinental railroad coming across the country, and it was going through Cheyenne, Wyoming, because the mountains are lower and it's easier to cross them up there. That's where I should have hiked. And what a group of business leaders here in this region said is, oh shit, if we don't connect to that rail spur, we can't connect to our future. So they privately raised the money and connected to that rail spur and frankly changed the course of our future. And I share this with you because I think we're at a moment where that same kind of thinking, that long-term strategic approach with funding coming from the private sector is probably critical to ensuring we position ourselves for our future. So we have some great news, right? Colorado has had the best economy in the nation 4 years running. And yes, I am counting. This is my job. US News and World Report is who tells us that. You'll see on this second slide, we're the second most educated state in the country, but I'll tell you, we have the smartest workforce in the nation because we're smarter than Massachusetts. They just have a few more degrees. When it comes to health, which is really important for economic success, we have 6 of the top 10 healthiest counties in the United States. When you look at certain factors like population health, food and nutrition, public safety, environment, Douglas and Broomfield in this region are number 2 and number 4 in the nation. And then the other counties, Routt, Pitkin, Summit, and San Miguel, are in the top 10. Very impressive. We're the leanest state still in the nation, and being lean does lead to better health outcomes. We're one of the best places still to start a company, and that was reinforced again even through the pandemic. And when you look at issues around race and inclusion and prosperity, we're #1 when you look at specifically prosperity, growth, and inclusion by race. That's pretty important when you consider the fastest growing populations in our nation are people of color. And so really thinking about our future. In this next slide, you're also going to see people still want to be here, not just those of us who are already here, but our net migration, and Patty will probably talk more about this, has been positive since 1990, although you'll see it's slowed a bit since 2000s. Denver was a top 5 city for inbound growth in 2020. And some of that is certainly, we have a state where people still perceive, and I think fairly, that we have a bit of space, that you can get outdoors, and in a pandemic, that was even more appealing. But Denver's for sale housing market, as we all heard, the inventory hit all-time lows in December. And that is a real challenge I'll talk about in a minute, is our housing costs. In this next slide, air travel is stronger in and out of Denver International Airport than most other airports in the nation. As a matter of fact, DEN was ranked as the 2nd busiest airport in the United States in June and July. Typically, we're coming in around 6th for the busy airports in the nation. Passenger traffic then increased from September to October by 14.2%. Why is this so important? Because this is our port. This is really how we move people and product around the world. United Airlines was quoted as saying Denver retained demand better than any other market that they're in. Southwest Airlines said our market has proven to be particularly resilient. This is really important to us because that airport really does drive our economic success. So there's some good news. Let's spend a little time talking about some of the bad news we've seen. Colorado went from having the 10th best in the top 10 best performing economy in the second quarter of 2020 to the 9th worst in the third quarter. And primarily you'll see in this slide on unemployment, a big part of that is because our unemployment rates, over 1 million Coloradans have filed for unemployment.
Kelly, it looks like your slide deck is stuck on the air travel.
Do we have an unemployment?
Yes, we do now. Thank you.
Now, thank you for catching that, Nicole. Over 1 million Coloradans have filed for unemployment since March. Just take a minute to get your head around that. We currently have 319,000 still on those unemployment rolls. And that reduction of 700,000 you may be thinking is good news, but it's not all good news. It's some people who've actually given up or can't get on the rolls. We started the pandemic much stronger than most of the nation with our unemployment rates, and now we're very similar to the rest of the United States. You'll see that in that next slide. In the next one, I want to talk a little about consumer spending that we see in our state compared to the United States. And it's lower in Colorado. We've slowed down much more than the rest of the country. And then you all know this better than anybody else in this next slide, but our housing costs are high. Really high. Denver Metro is the number 13 for the highest median home price. I think I pulled this data from the third quarter of 2020, and Boulder is number 7. And when you come off a coast, we are getting people's attention. And you can imagine why this is important to employers, because you all know how we build wealth in this country is through home ownership. That is the primary strategy, and we are removing the opportunity for home ownership from too many of our employees. And this will be an employee retention issue for us. And I think in 2021, what you'll see is employers start to step into these discussions about how do you build affordable workforce housing, for sale products that can really meet the needs of our workers. In this next slide, you're going to see the pandemic has hit some much harder than others. You know this by industry, hospitality, restaurant, aviation. Those industries have been hit extremely hard by the pandemic. Entertainment, but also we see in workers, those workers who are earning more than $60,000 have really started to come out of any kind of the negative consequences they might have experienced in 2020 already, but low wage earners are still substantially impaired. And what we know is we have a disproportionate number of women and people of color in those lower wage earning jobs as well. So you see increased race disparities and gender disparities because of this. I have some national data here that shows job loss for women in particular. A record number of women have left the labor force in 2020, 2.2 million as of October. That's compared to 1.3 million men who've left the force. Labor participation rate for women is an all-time low since the 1980s. Some of you probably weren't even alive in the 1980s, I fear. Today, the labor participation rate for women is 55.9%. Nationally, only 12%, and I could only find national data on this, 12% of Black and Latino-owned businesses applied for PPP funds and actually received them. While 34% of businesses, Latino businesses nationally were closed at some point due to the virus, that is actually double what we saw for generally when you look at companies who had to close. I highlight because I will tell you in 2021, these disparities will be a huge part of our economic challenge that we have to take on. I'll close by saying, if that's not enough, we have some serious challenges coming at our employers around public policy. New regulations that are increasing costs, and at a time when many of our employers are struggling to keep their employees on payroll, the impact of these can be very negative while the intention maybe have been very positive. There were things like a House bill last year that decoupled us from the federal CARES relief and removed the tax benefits, so we couldn't benefit as much from them. Rulemaking has increased to a level in Colorado that we have never seen, really hitting our employers, from everything of how an employer must post a job to wage orders that have been coming out, changing rules for employers. Of course, we have upcoming paid sick and family leave that has been approved by our voters. We know we will have increasing unemployment insurance claims because of the number of claims, rising minimum wage. We have public issues like challenges to Labor Peace Act, which is how you unionize in Colorado, public health option, the implementation of family leave. I mention these things because our employers are significantly impacted, and our ability to keep those employers on payroll, or those employers to keep their employees on payroll, has to be job one for us in 2021. So our focus right now is truly, can we grow those jobs? This year, we are down about 66,000 jobs right now. We have huge work to do to bring those jobs back. And frankly, we can't afford to continue to have policy that can hinder our ability to do that. I think this last slide simply highlights some upcoming events we have. Yep, it is the next one. You can go through. Where you can have more conversations with us about these issues or learn more about some of the work we're doing. I'll pass it to Patty because I know we're tight on time and I want to make sure you get her great data. Thanks for having us be part of this, Nicole.
Absolutely. Well, and we'll have a head start because I'm halfway through introducing Patty anyway, so it's all good. We'll make up for it. No, you didn't go over it all. And that was fantastic. And what an incredible impact that you're making, and that drive towards filling jobs supports all of us, right? It certainly supports us in this industry, but it supports the entire economy. So love that. So Miss Patty Silverstein, take two. Love you, and just ready to get this going. So we already started the economic trend. We're going to keep going with that. So I do want to make sure that I am able to highlight the things that Patty has done is off the charts phenomenal. The associations that she's part of, the influence that she has, that she covers. So she is, as I mentioned, the president and chief economist of the Development Research Partners, a Jefferson County, Colorado-based real estate analysis and economic development research company. She also serves as a consulting chief economist for the Metro Denver Economic Development Corp. And the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. Patty is an active member she's an active member in a number of businesses and professional organizations, including the chair of manufacturing committee for the University of Colorado's Business Economic Outlook Forum, board member of the Council for Community and Economic Research, and member of 3 more organizations: the Governor's Revenue Estimating Advisory Committee, the Economic Development Council of Colorado, and the Denver Association of Business Economists. You think I get tired in the day. So as the saying goes, if you want something done, ask a truly busy person. So we've asked Patty to share her knowledge with us again today. Love that you're doing that. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. And thank you, Kelly, too, for giving that whole overview on Metro Denver. It is a great honor that I have to work so closely with the Denver Metro Chamber and the Metro Denver EDC, and if you all are not involved with your local chambers of commerce, local economic development groups, what have you, please get involved. They're great ways to really make sure that we are maintaining a vibrant business community here throughout the state of Colorado. So I'm going to talk today about creating some new opportunities here, because in the words of John F. Kennedy, in a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. And I think that is so important right now that, so many of us have gone through the whole 2020, and Nicole, I love the whole idea of we get the reset now. We get to start into a whole new year here. And truly, it's good to be starting out our new year's then looking forward to some new opportunities. So I know that Elliot is going to be covering all sorts of the global information and the national situation and that type of thing, but I just want to start with just a little bit of framework as far as where I'm coming from when I talk about the whole Colorado situation. Obviously, from the global situation, the big story, of course, has been COVID. And we mourn the loss of 1.9 million people across the globe. And we see that various countries all across the globe are also having various degrees of openness right now. Our travel restrictions are still in place for various countries. It limits business, limits pleasure trips, creating some of these whole supply demand challenges. But we have a vaccine, and that is really going to be something that is going to change our economic framework, I believe, in this year. Although, keep in mind, we probably won't see that framework changing real solidly until the middle of the year, as that whole vaccine becomes very widespread. All of that to say that in 2020, our world economic output declined. 2021 is actually expected to be pretty good. Again, we're in this whole soon to be recovery. It is going to be a lot of fits and starts, though, along the way, just until we get to that, again, more wide distribution on the vaccine. In the US, we have seen that our federal government, our Federal Reserve has tried to be very accommodative in terms of keeping everything going. Nearly $6 trillion in relief funds have been infused into the economy. The Federal Reserve is maintaining these very low interest rates, again, trying to spur spending and that type of thing. With that, we have seen these huge spikes in GDP. In second quarter, because of all the closures that we experienced, we saw an over 31% decline in GDP, followed the next quarter by an over 33% increase. This crazy up and down. When you start to even that out, we'll see that we do still expect that our national GDP will decrease by about 4% in 2020. That was a big decline. But if misery loves company at all, recognize that the 1930s, the 1940s, that's where we saw even steeper declines in GDP than what we had experienced recently. I don't know that provides a whole lot of solace to us, but that anyway, that's the case. Our expectation, and this is kind of the foundation as I start digging into Colorado data now, our expectation is that in 2021, we'll see GDP bouncing back by about a 4% growth rate, maybe a little bit lower than that. And I'm sure Elliot will talk about this, but some of the forecasts for this kind of range from a 3.5% up to, I've seen some up to 4.7% for the US. I'm kind of coming in right around that 4% range. So, okay, where are we at here in Colorado? So when we take a look at employment then across the country, and this takes a look at data just through November of 2020, we see that Colorado right now is about in the middle of the pack. And Kelly kind of talked about this a little bit too, in that here we had been one of the fastest growing states, and now we're kind of middle of the pack in terms of our recovery. Notice that it's a very broad range of what we're experiencing all across the country. We have Hawaii, whose employment is down by 15%, versus in November, we had the first state to actually post a year-over-year increase in employment since April. So Idaho, actually, their employment increased by about 0.5% then in November 2020 compared to November 2019. Utah basically flat there. I mean, okay. When we talk about economic development prospects and everything, we look at Idaho, we look at Utah as being very strong competitors. But I'm still excited about the fact that they're actually posting some positive increases in employment. I think that bodes well for us, for the whole western part of the US, indeed for the whole US. It shows that there is indeed this whole ability to overcome all of the challenges that we saw in 2020. But again, right now, Colorado being kind of middle of the pack. So taking a closer look at Colorado's employment, and I want to compare kind of the Great Recession to the COVID recession, just in terms of, trying to understand the job losses that we have had and how long it takes us to recover. If you can kind of follow my cursor here, in the Great Recession, we went down by 155,000 jobs. We lost those jobs over 20 months. It then took about 38 months to get back to where we had been. In this COVID recession, we all know this was very different. We have drawn charts like we never thought we would be drawing when it comes to economic data. In the COVID recession, we went down by 343,000 jobs in just 3 months. Now the big question is, how long is it going to take us to recover? Right now, when you take a look at the data through November, we actually saw that our seasonally adjusted employment went down a little bit from October to November. And I know some people are going to look at that and say, oh no, what is happening? Again, this is all very much based upon what type of restrictions we are all operating within. This is going to be in fits and starts until we can really fully reopen our economy. So don't lose heart, don't lose faith, even though we saw a little bit of a pullback again in some of that November data. Again, this is still on a good, solid growth trend, although it's going to be in fits and starts. Just as a point here, so right now through November, Colorado has recovered about 61% of our jobs. We're still ahead of the national average in terms of those jobs that being recovered. Right now, the US is at about 56% of the jobs have been recovered. So we're doing a little bit better than the national average again. So how long is this going to take? I mean, I would say that at the worst case scenario, if we're looking at like a 36-month type of recovery here for Colorado, the worst case scenario, I believe, that means that by April 2023, we will have recovered all of the jobs that had been lost. I think that we are going to be a little bit ahead of that. I think that it's more like a late 2022. Again, it's a process. It's a process of adding back those jobs and all, but it's going to feel oh so much better in the next few months. So even though, no, we're not going to be back to the peak that we had been before, it's really going to start feeling better as we start to distribute that vaccine, as we start to be able to reopen things once again. So our employment losses have certainly varied all across the state. I mean, this chart takes a look at our 7 metropolitan statistical areas across the state. So those MSAs basically covering about 17 of Colorado's 64 counties. We see that through November, if you take a look at the average employment data from January to November 2020, compared with that same period of time in 2019, Colorado employment down by about 4.2%. Recognize those are preliminary numbers. When the Department of Labor come March, they will actually re-benchmark all of this data. Our expectation is that that job loss is going to be even greater than that, so that rather than that 4.2% decline that we've been kind of posting recently, we're likely to see that pushing out to about a 4.7% decline. Again, don't lose heart when you see those types of numbers or see those types of changes. That is what will be coming out in March. Just recognize that that's a whole kind of data process, because we go through a survey methodology, which then gets posted to actual administrative data. So anyway, but nonetheless, let me just kind of talk about this from the standpoint of the preliminary data that we have right now. Grand Junction of our urbanized areas in the state of Colorado actually performing at the best rate right now, with just that 2.2% decline. Grand Junction being influenced very significantly by retirees, being also influenced by the folks that have moved out there for the active outdoor lifestyle, to be a little bit closer to all of our various mountain amenities and other outdoor amenities. Colorado Springs also doing, hanging in there, doing a little bit better than our statewide average right now. Colorado Springs being influenced by military operations. They're also seeing some large increases in terms of cybersecurity. That's a significant base that they have there in Colorado Springs, as well as some of your back office types of operations. Pueblo, finally, Pueblo too is starting to see some improvements in terms of renewable energy. So Vestas is a very big supplier down there. They're actually seeing some resurgence too in some of the steel operations. So again, it's been a tough road for Pueblo after their big steel operations had really scaled back. Now they're starting to see a little bit of improvement once again. In the Metro Denver region, we represent 62% of the employment base throughout the state. We're seeing a little bit better performance than the statewide average right about now, because of our significant bases in aerospace, for example, has been increasing very, very rapidly in the Metro Denver region, and also a lot of the high-tech industries. So a lot of these industries that are very reliant upon our highly educated workforce that Kelly had mentioned are those companies that are growing, expanding here within Denver. Fort Collins and Greeley coming in at about 4.1%, so right around that whole statewide average. Greeley been challenged by the oil and gas industry. I mean, that's such a significant base for that county, versus Fort Collins and also Boulder have been heavily influenced, I think, by the situations that have been happening with our universities, whether they're bringing students on or changing how students are able to access their education. And so certainly it is a point as far as the retail spending that those students typically bring into the region and the economic activity that they generate within those areas. So both Fort Collins and Boulder kind of challenged by that. Boulder also being challenged by some of the tourism activity. As we see fewer tourists, fewer people coming in from out of state to visit our fair state, we are seeing some challenges there. But that is even more evident if we take a look elsewhere in Colorado. So again, those urbanized areas represent 17 of our counties. If we take a look at what's happening all throughout the rest of those counties, we see that employment has fallen by even more than what we have seen at the state level. So employment elsewhere in Colorado, that's all of our mountain resort areas, our eastern plains, our kind of rural parts of the state, employment down by 9.2%. And certainly that's very much impacted by the tourism base that we have here, as well as, again, various changes in terms of what we can have open and not have open and that type of thing. So that's the employment base in terms of what we call our wage and salary employment. Recognize that here throughout the state of Colorado, we also have a very significant base of these sole proprietors that are operating throughout Colorado. These are our gig workers. In 2018, we surpassed 1 million gig workers here in the state of Colorado, and we saw this continue to increase throughout 2019. We have the 5th strongest concentration of sole proprietors here in Colorado compared to the national average. We're at about 26% versus the national average at about 23%. And I bring this up because this becomes very important too when we start talking about what we see happening with our unemployment claims, and we'll pick that up here in just a little bit. So, how are your customers doing? You know, Andrew had talked about, you know, and Nicole did too, about how you all are in a role of really trying to relay this information to folks that are out there thinking about buying a new home. Maybe it's buying that first home or changing their place of residence there. And I think it's important for you to understand the environment that your customers, your clients are operating in. And certainly we have seen that our businesses, our consumers have had to be very adaptable. I mean, that has certainly been the buzzword, I think, all throughout 2020, was to be adaptable, to be flexible in our operations. So I think one of the greatest things that you all can do for your customers, for your clients, is really taking a look at what you can do to make sure that they feel comfortable doing business with you. And because we know that certainly those times have changed there. In terms of our businesses, in terms of our kind of whole, as we start digging into that whole employment base here in Colorado a little bit more specifically, chances are your clients, your customers are employed in a small business here in Colorado. Indeed, 98% of our companies in Colorado have fewer than 100 employees. And some of these small businesses are a little bit challenged in terms of their ability to do business. Indeed, we have seen that our number of small businesses that are open in the state of Colorado is down by about 30% through the beginning of December compared to where they had been in January. This is right about on target too with what we're seeing at a whole national level. And I want to point out, because there's going to be several charts from this Opportunity Insights. This is a program of Harvard University that has been tracking a lot of the data, a lot of what has been happening within our businesses, within our consumers and all. And they have some really fun statistics, fun information to take a look at. So if you haven't looked at this stuff before, I encourage you to do that. So anyway, our small businesses have certainly been challenged here. Digging into the type of companies and the type of businesses that we have here in Colorado, this takes a look at all of our employment here throughout the state by what we call super sector. You've heard me say this before. All businesses that operate are classified into one of these various industry buckets, if you will. Professional and business services is our largest super sector here in Colorado, and it represents a whole catch-all of categories from accounting and legal services all the way through computer design and architecture and design. A lot of you folks there that are our real estate environment, you're found primarily in our financial activities sector, okay? So that includes a lot of our mortgage companies as well as the brokers are also classified in there too, if they're with a company. Otherwise, you could be one of those sole proprietors, one of those gig workers that I talked about before. So in terms of what different sectors are doing well right now, professional and business services is one that we're actually seeing increases in our employment base this year compared to last year. Also, that manufacturing, which is circled in green, is basically flat here in Colorado. These are two really good pieces of information for us, really good news. Oftentimes when you have growth in your professional and business services, it really serves as the opportunity to lift up all of our other types of companies, all of our other types of businesses here. It's almost a leading indicator, if you will, in terms of employment opportunities on down the road. And manufacturing being also important here in Colorado. Again, a lot of this is being driven by what we see happening in terms of aerospace employment, what we also see happening on the high tech side here. And again, those industries bringing new dollars into our state, bringing new opportunities into our state. On the other hand, if your customers, if your clients are in one of those high touch industries, such as leisure and hospitality, again, those are all of our restaurants, all of our hotels, other services. Other services are generally a lot of your personal services. So it's your beauty parlors and all that, your barbershops that are classified within there. Those industries are still very challenged because they have been severely impacted, of course, by the restrictions in terms of opening and how much capacity they are able to have. I would also note that mining and logging, which is our smallest industry here in Colorado, but is one that has a big impact on our area because of the high multiplier effects within our oil and gas industry, that is an industry that has also been significantly constrained because of what's been going on with oil prices and all, and the drilling activity. So all of this, if you were to look at all of the wages and salaries amongst these various industries, you would see that if we took a look just at like the second quarter of 2020 data, our employment was down in that period of time by nearly 10%, but our wages were only down by 2% during that period of time. So we have really been able to maintain the income levels throughout here. But the losses that have occurred in those high touch industries, leisure and hospitality, other services, very, very significant for those individuals within those professions. But as a whole, our whole pie here in Colorado has not been as impacted as those individual households, if that makes sense there. Add all those together, our expectation in 2020 then is that we will see about 131,000 job losses in Colorado. A big chunk of those job losses happening within Metro Denver, down by about 74,000. And I know Kelly had mentioned about 66,000, which is what we were expecting originally. We've had to kind of scale that back again because of some of those changes, those revisions that are going to be happening within the employment data. But the good news is that in 2021, we expect that we will start to experience those increases in employment once again, adding back about 68,000 jobs in 2021. Again, not adding back everything that was lost, but we hope that that will happen more by the end of 2022. Just another look at that, you know, when we think about the Great Recession and think about all of those challenges that we had during the Great Recession, recognize that the losses that we experienced in 1 year in 2020 were greater than the losses that we experienced in 2009 and 2010 together. So maybe though, your customers, your clients, you're relying upon those folks that are moving into the state, or maybe also you're looking at clients that are very heavily dependent, that their business, their operation is very heavily dependent upon the population growth within the state of Colorado. Well, in 2021, we are expected to see the slowest population growth in our state of Colorado going back to the year 1990. So this is partly, I mean, this is a whole national trend. When you take a look at the national population data, we have seen that population growth, it was some of the at historic lows throughout the entire country. But certainly all throughout 2020, all throughout 2021, we are seeing slow growth here in Colorado as well. Usually our population is going to be growing by roughly around 75,000 people throughout the state of Colorado. Our expectation then, or rather our state demography office is telling us that the expectations for that growth are significantly less than that for the next couple of years, starting to get back to more semblance of normal population growth by about the year 2025. Natural increase, our population is composed of both a natural increase as well as migration, natural increase being births greater than deaths. Notice that births and because of the high death rate as well as lower births in 2020, that natural increase was much lower than what we have seen. And we expect that to start to build up once again. I mean, there's been a lot of debate as far as whether or not we'll have more kids born because everybody's staying home, or whether we'll have fewer kids born because everybody is saying, I don't want to bring a baby into the world at this point in time. I think that actually we will start to see that more normal type of birth rate. It has been relatively low recently. Again, in the next few years, starting to pick up. Net migration, that's the number of people moving into the area, less the number of people moving out. Those are a lot of the new residents too that you all are looking at when you're out there trying to find the perfect new home for these folks. That again, starting to pick up again, kind of by the middle of the decade. But notice that contrary to what we saw during 1990, contrary to what we saw during that slower economic growth period too in the year 2000, we still expect net migration to be at some relatively high levels here in Colorado. So again, as I mentioned, maybe those folks that you are working with, your clients, your customers, are in a retail type of environment, some type of service type of environment. This has been a story of very two different facets here, kind of a great divide, if you will, in terms of what we have seen happening. We have some of those service providers, some of those retailers that are doing really good out there and have seen sales like never before, versus others that are challenged. Those that are circled in green here are the ones that are doing really well. So first of all, non-store retailers, that's economist geek speak for those e-commerce operations out there. We all know we have been pulling in spending more and more of our dollars through e-commerce operations. Food and beverages, those grocery stores, those liquor stores, we've been definitely still getting out there, still getting to them. Building materials, garden equipment, our Home Depots, our Lowe's, all of those hardware stores have been really doing a great business right about now, as we've all been staying home and redecorating, redesigning, what have you. On the downside, however, again, are those that are in the food services and drinking places arena, or in other words, our bars and restaurants. Activity there definitely pulled way back. Gasoline stations, because have not been driving as much, that has pulled way back, as well as because of lower prices. And then also clothing and clothing accessories. This has been tough for our malls because that's where a lot of those they rely upon a lot of those soft goods sales. And we just haven't been out and about as much. We haven't been spending as much on clothing there. that was all national data. If we were to take a look at what's been happening in Colorado, as Kelly had kind of mentioned too, we're actually seeing our spending patterns a little bit lower here in Colorado. The US has seen a little bit more of an uptick in activity than what we've seen in Colorado. Again, I think a lot of that because of the importance of the tourist space. Yes, you and I may think of ourselves now with all of our staycations. Yes, we are tourists within our own state, but we also rely very, very heavily upon those out of state, those out of country individuals that come to our state. So we're seeing then that our retail numbers down are not increasing as rapidly as they have been at the national level, and some of our components down further. On the healthcare side, healthcare, those healthcare workers have been rock stars throughout all of this, but recognizing that many of our medical professions are still seeing spending patterns that are down, employment that is down because of the lack of elective procedures that are happening. If we were to take a look again at some of those high touch types of industries, our restaurants down by 43% in Colorado, transportation, that would be all of our air transportation, our mass transit, all of that, which is in there, down by nearly 60%. Entertainment, oh, how we miss going to a movie, miss going to a concert, miss going to the museums, all of that. Our entertainment down by about 64% throughout the state of Colorado. Again, all of those components down a little bit steeper than what we're seeing at a national level. So picking up then too on, if you're running your own business, if you're an employee for a business too, one of the key things at this phase, at this type of stage of our economic activity is how do we control some of those business costs right about now? So one of the things that I have been telling various companies and all that is that now is a great time as we're looking for these opportunities here. Now is a great time to pick up those additional workers if you can. If you can take the long view of what are my staffing needs going to be 6 months from now, now is an excellent, excellent time to really jump in there and find those workers that you need. Start to incorporate them into your business environment, your business culture, that type of thing. Because we do have a lot of folks that are unemployed right now. Our unemployment rate, the good news was that it did not reach as high as it did during the Great Recession. But the bad news of that too is it was because we saw a lot of exodus of people out of our labor force, shown by that labor force participation rate. A lot of women that were dropping out of the labor force because of responsibilities as caregivers for children or for other adults. Just a lot of men too that have been, in many families, it's really been a lot of back and forth as far as how they need to accommodate their children's education or the caregiving that is necessary for their extended families as well. In terms of then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of folks out there that are just looking for these new opportunities. When we take a look at the unemployment in our state, we can look at this in terms of initial claims, those people that file initially for unemployment versus the continued claims, those that were approved for unemployment and yet remain unemployed. Notice that those numbers have been ticking upwards through the end of December because again, as we went into more restrictive business environments due to COVID, we saw more people again losing those jobs. So that green line, which is the initial claims, we've seen that increasing pretty rapidly in the last couple of months. We're back over 40,000 people filing for initial unemployment claims. Notice that in this includes both our regular unemployment insurance claims as well as what are called PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. This was a program offering all of those gig workers. Remember those 1 10 million plus people that I talked about here in Colorado, those gig workers now also have access to unemployment insurance. And this was a fairly new phenomenon. Notice that you see a little bit of decline in that number in the 1226, that the last on the far right of that chart. That was actually because the PUA folks, the gig workers, could not claim during that period of time because of a halt, if you will, in the CARES Act. There was kind of that disruption in that between when Congress had approved the extension versus when President Trump had signed that work. So don't be fooled by that decline in number. That was really kind of a whole administrative type of thing. Continuing claims, which are the column there, the scale for that being on the left side of the chart. Notice that our continuing claims, we are now over 250,000 people too that are that are experiencing continuing unemployment here in the state. So there's a lot of folks out there that need work. So now is a great time again to really incorporate those folks into your whole environment. No, it's going to cost you a little more money here. We have seen an increase now in our minimum wage. So Colorado's minimum wage went from $12 an hour to $12.32 as of January 1, so a 2.7% increase in that. The city and county of Denver has a minimum wage that is higher than the state level, and they increased to $14.77 as of January 1, so up by about $2. So keep in mind, I mean, a lot of our lower wage workers that are in those high touch industries, our restaurants, our hotels, a lot of the retail, even as these companies are struggling with capacity limits, they are also going to be struggling with higher cost structure there. So again, kind of a challenge there. In terms of the influence of all of the changes that we have seen in terms of employment on our commercial real estate market, in general, office, industrial, retail, we're seeing that those vacancy rates for space have been increasing slightly. And this is just data for Metro Denver. You know, all throughout the state of Colorado, real estate is a very localized type of thing. So, you know, so if you're in a different part of the state at all, you may be having a slightly different experience, but in general, vacancy rates have been going up. Lease rates have been relatively flat. Just in terms of new construction activity though, oh my gosh, in 2019 or 2018 rather, we added 11.2 million square feet of new office, industrial, and retail space to accommodate all of the job growth that has been happening in the Metro Denver region. Indeed, industrial activity we've seen 5 million square feet or more of industrial space added each year for the past 4 years. We expect that 2021 will be the 5th year of increase. Industrial, really a lot of the increases there because, again, of that e-commerce activity. Logistics operations here in Colorado and in the Metro Denver region in particular have been growing to meet all that demand as our e-commerce companies are trying to make sure that those goods that you've ordered are delivered to your doorstep within hours, okay, maybe a day or two, but trying to make sure that they are stockpiling those goods in a way that they can be distributed out very quickly to the people that have ordered them. On the office side, you know, there's been a lot of discussion on the office side. Are we going to see office space that is, what's the future of office space? You know, for many of us that have had to shift to working from home, some people are saying, you know, this really works for me. I like keeping my bunny slippers on all day. Versus there are other people such as myself who discover I really stink at working from home. I want to be back in the office. I want to be back in seeing my peeps. You know, so I think that the office market, yes, we're going to see some changes. We're going to see more flexibility in the office space, but I do think that that market is indeed going to be solid once again as we start to more fully open everything. Retail has been challenged. Brick and mortar, yes, we still want to get out there. We want to touch things. We want to be able to see what we're purchasing. But we also need to recognize that a lot of folks have gone the e-commerce route, feeling like that they can get better bargains or something there. I think that the successful retailers are really going to have this whole kind of combination of both brick and mortar operations as well as expanding their opportunities online. So just in my last couple of minutes here, I just want to hit upon a few pieces of my observations about the residential real estate market. A lot has already been discussed about this, but you know, one of the things I had been looking as we moved into 2020, I was like, oh, finally, we're starting to see that our housing prices are increasing at a pace that is more in line with our increase in wages and increase in overall prices. So our average annual wage being that green line, which tends to track very closely with our overall rate of inflation, versus the blue line being the housing prices. So I thought that we were really going to see some more affordability within our marketplace, but as you all know, those home prices have definitely increased at a very rapid pace. And so this chart in 2020, once it gets extended out to 2020, is again going to be with that blue line significantly higher. Kelly also showed a chart similar to this, you know, and talked about the challenges of these rising prices when it comes to attracting companies, attracting workers here to the area. Again, that whole affordability issue. Just even as we have seen tremendous increases in our prices in the Metro Denver region, we need to recognize that some of the fastest increases that we have seen in the state in terms of pricing has actually been in the Greeley marketplace and the Fort Collins marketplaces versus some of the slowest increases in Grand Junction. And perhaps that is too one of the reasons why our Grand Junction marketplace is still pretty solid, because people can still afford to live there. They can afford to move out into that region. Homes sales activity all throughout the state of Colorado kind of mirrors what you have been experiencing here in the Metro Denver region, with sales going through the roof, some of the highest level of home sale activity ever experienced throughout the state of Colorado. We expect that that is still going to continue into 2021, although, you know, in 2020, you saw single family home sales activity up by 8%, attached home activity up by just a little bit below that. We expect 2021 is still going to be very solid, but sorry guys, I don't expect this 8% type of increase in home sales activity to increase. Apartments, you know, if you're not ready for that first home, or if your lifestyle has changed and you want to occupy an apartment there, we are seeing that our average rental rates in apartments, even though there still is some strong demand, we're starting to see some of that demand move outside of urban cores into more suburban areas. So we're getting some of that kind of pushback to the higher density living. I don't expect that that's going to continue for long, but it is happening right now. We're starting to see those rental rates then stabilize a little bit more. And one of the other reasons for stabilization in those rental rates, and also what I expect will be stabilization in some of those single family prices, is that we have been building at a nice brisk pace in Colorado. Compared to the Great Recession, when we were building next to nothing, but we still had people moving into the state, we have finally kind of filled in that gap. And now we're starting to see construction activity that is more consistent with the population growth that we are experiencing throughout the state. So there you have it. There's kind of the update as far as what's been happening all throughout the state of Colorado. If any of you have additional questions or want to talk about something that we're seeing, please do feel free to reach out to me. So with that, Nicole, I am going to turn this back to you. I believe, stopped my screen share. So there we go.
Sounds
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you very much, Patty. Thank you. That was fantastic. I have a ton of questions. So if we can make it to the Q&A section, we absolutely will ask a lot of them. Elliot tends to talk for a long time, so we don't know for sure. But so speaking of course, you all had the poll. Everybody was kind of worried about that in the chat. The poll is right in front of your face. If you can please put that vote in, and then you can close that up. That is the second of 3. Where the first one came within a minute. The second, some of you weren't even on yet, and the second one just now, and the third one will be right after Elliot. So make sure to stay tuned, watch for that poll. Part of the whole CE thing. You gotta be watching. So with that, I'm not even sure if I need to introduce Elliot Eisenberg, but I'm going to take a stab at that. And I was actually considering having everybody pick up their laptops and go walk around the room and jump on a table. But then I was kind of worried that might come back on DMAR. And I thought that's probably not a good idea. And they wouldn't appreciate me saying that. So I decided that don't do that. Don't lift up your laptops and go walk around the room aimlessly because you'll make yourself dizzy and you'll hurt yourself. But I do miss the fact that I won't get to watch Elliot do that. So I want to introduce a few of Elliot's incredible accolades. So Elliot Eisenberg is a nationally acclaimed economist and public speaker specializing in making the minutia of economics fun and relevant and educational. You do that.
I try. Thank you.
He is the author of more than 85 articles, serves on the expert advisory board of the Mortgage Market Guide, and a regular consultant to several large real estate professional associations. He has spoken to hundreds of business groups and associations. His research opinions have been featured on Bloomberg, Business Week, Bureau of National Affairs, and Forbes and Fortune. And of course, he lights up our inbox every evening with his 70-word commentary. In fact, I look forward to it. So Elliot, it is my good pleasure to present your turn.
Wow. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. It was wonderful seeing Patty's presentation. It was interesting. I got questions about that too. It was fun seeing Kelly's presentation and Andrew's talk. I mean, I'm not sure even necessary at this point. You've covered so much territory, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and hopefully we'll be off and running at that point. We should be ready to go. Let's start. So, things are okay. I have a couple, we have to make sure to thank our sponsors here. I'm thanking 210 Warranty directly. There's AAG and you, right? Better Together. Thank you to them. The Ruth team, Nicole, thank you. Here's how to get a hold of me. This is my name, cell number, phone number, Twitter handle, email address, everything. And Nicole, as you said, I put out 70 words every day on the economy. You can get it at my website by going there to sign up. You can email me at Elliot@Graphs and Laughs, or you can text the word bow tie to the 5-digit number 22828. You'll hear from me every day. You'll be asked for an email address. You'll hear from me again. Bow tie, one word, bow tie, to the 5-digit number 22828. The economy is now weak. Don't look at this and extrapolate. It will get better. Q2 and Q3 and Q4 will be good. Q1 will be a little dicey. You're in the best industry. It's not going to improve. Your inventory starved. That problem's not going to go away. I've spoken for too long. I'm sorry, but thank you, thank you, thank you.
Elliot, it is always a pleasure. And you literally, I think, had just as much energy on Zoom as you do in the room. So hats off to you.
Thank you.
So if we want, I'm going to pass the baton over to Mike. So Mike, if you can unmute yourself, I want to first say thank you to Elliot, to Patty, to Kelly, to Andrew. My gosh. What an incredible amount of data, of opportunity for conversation, of the ability to understand not only where we are and why we are where we are, but then how to communicate that with your buyers and your sellers and help them get off the fence. Now, Mike is going to take over. I do want to preface this with, if you want to stick around, we are going to be around for a little bit longer answering questions. I know that it's getting a little bit late, but if you want to hang out with these guys, answer some of the questions that were posed, we're going to get back to that after Mike. So why don't you take it over?
I'll do it. Thanks, Nicole. And thank you to all of our presenters. This by far had to be the best and robust economic summit that I've ever been to. So everybody is awesome. Elliot, I mean, I couldn't believe you could do this without a big stage to jump up and down around, but you did it and you just did a great job with it. So thanks so much. Listen, I want to give a quick plug here for our January Connect meeting at DMAR. This is a free meeting. It's going to be next Friday on the 15th, a week from today. And if you're interested, you can RSVP on the DMAR website. We're going to have Steve Murray, and Steve is the president of Real Trends, and our own CEO, Nobu Hata. They're going to be discussing changes to the model MLS rules and regulations, as well as MLS policy statements and what trends to watch in 2021. This is really going to be a valuable meeting to attend. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of it. They're also going to work to unpack some of what we hear about today and help you understand how to actually apply the information to your business. So I recommend you check it out. We already have 500 plus people registered for this thing. So it's a free event. Don't miss it. Go to dmarrealtors.com and RSVP for this. It's a great event. I'm really looking forward to it myself. So Nicole, if you want to start with some question and answers, let's have at it.
That dang mute button. Elliot, can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Oh, yes. My apologies.
Just wanted to make sure. All right. So let's ask some of the questions. And really, it's for anybody that wants to jump in. Some of them are a little bit more specific, but some of them, it's just more of some question behind the facts that you guys shared, which is phenomenal. So interestingly enough, so Elliot talked a little bit about the migration supporting Colorado. Patty talked about the migration waning. Love to know kind of which direction you guys think it's headed and maybe why, because that some people are thinking, well, we are getting a lot of population gain, but maybe we're not. So I'd love to hear that.
So I'll jump in on that first of all here. So because of COVID, we saw fewer people moving, but this was a trend even before COVID. We were seeing fewer people moving everywhere across the country. All of the migration trends were lower, population growth at the whole US level, lower. But certainly here in Colorado, I mean, I think a lot of it was more COVID influence than big influence there. Again, if you think back, I mean, while usually from a net migration standpoint, you know, we're looking at 40,000-ish people on average in the state of Colorado. We're seeing that number come down, at least for the next couple of years. But then our state demographer says it's heading right back up again come middle of the decade.
Okay. And the other thing to keep in mind is it's all relative too. US population growth in 2020 was the worst since 1918. Now, before the pandemic in 2019, that was the worst year since 1918. US doesn't have births over deaths. We're all watching football. We're not having kids because kids are expensive and housing is costly and so on. And you look in San Francisco, number of kids in the city of Sets was almost zero because it's so expensive to live there. So high home prices lead to reduced number of children. You get these weird outcomes. And then we have little immigration as well. So the combination is overall leading to very, very slow US population growth. That said, Colorado is a beneficiary of more than its fair share of population growth. So we're both, Patty and I are both talking the same thing. We're agreeing here. We're not disagreeing. We're just, Patty's saying, gee, it's too bad it's not what it was. And I'm saying, hey, compared to everywhere else, it's pretty good.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense and it's super helpful because I know there was a lot of questions about that. Do you have, or where can we go to get the data on a regular basis, or do you know where they're coming from? Primarily what states and or what cities into Colorado?
So here in Colorado, California is our #1 contributor. I mean, but when you look at kind of the inflows versus outflows to Colorado, it's California, it's Texas, it's Illinois, it's Florida as well, are some of the key movements that we see here in Colorado. And the data comes from, I mean, yes, there's some Census Bureau data, but there's also IRS data, and the IRS tracks, you know, where you were filing your income tax from one year to another. And so there's some great information on the kind of the inflows and outflows at a state level there. So,
Okay.
And the other thing to remember, I want to add a little color here. The people coming from California are really house rich. So they can afford to buy stuff that the people from Illinois and, you know, Texas, they just don't have the mojo for that. Home prices are much cheaper in those states. Anybody who's a homeowner almost anywhere in California will find Colorado cheap. So there may not be a lot of people moving in, but they've got a lot of money.
All relative for sure. And then both of you kind of said something about this, and there were some questions in the Q&A. So I want to make sure we have the opportunity to clarify about where will Colorado go from here? Like, do you think that we'll continue to see the uptick in appreciation and the uptick in sales units, or do you think that that's going to stagger or go flat?
so the housing appreciation that we experienced in 2020, I do not believe will continue into 2021. And what has been kind of unusual about 2020 as well is that our appreciation rate, even though it was really strong here, was less than the national average. And that's kind of the expectation too as we move into 2021. I view that, I mean, I know you guys may be looking at that thinking, oh, that's horrible, but I looked at that as good news, because from an economic development standpoint, again, if we're competing all across the country for those jobs, those people, if our housing appreciation, if our housing prices, if that differential, Elliot kept talking about differentials between this year and last year and all, again, if we look at the differential between Metro Denver, for example, and the national level, it's starting to shrink a little bit. And I view that as very good news. So that's what we expect, is a little bit lower than the national average.
On units sold as well, or just strictly on appreciation?
I'm sorry, Nicole, what was that question again?
On units sold as well, or just on the appreciation? Do you think we'll sell less next year?
Yes, I think you will sell less next year. I mean, again, a lot of that, it's like, oh, you know, don't go crying home or anything. Oh, you're probably already home. But I do expect that the home sales activity will be less. And again, for all of those reasons that Elliot had kind of mentioned as well, that again, the 8% sales rate that we were seeing throughout the state of Colorado in 2020 is not going to continue into 2021.
Coming off of the extreme highs is not a bad thing to be, right? So, Patty, a couple people were talking about it, and Elliot, you brought up this as well, as far as the new builds, right? And not having the ability to have the permits, maybe even how difficult Denver can be to get housing permits. Can you talk a little bit more about the construction sector and what we might be seeing?
So in terms of that, I mean, again, I think that we are looking forward to construction activity pretty similar to what we saw in 2020 as we move into 2021. So from a new home construction, but again, all of those things that have been discussed as challenges here. I mean, the cost structure, the ability to permit the lands, water constraints, that type of thing. Those are all definitely weighing on the amount of construction activity that we can have here in Colorado. Nonetheless, I mean, I think that Metro Denver, we're expecting a pretty flat type of activity. Colorado may be a little bit higher, mainly because of some other construction activity in other parts of the state. But keep in mind, though, that given our level of population growth, we are building at at a near equilibrium type of level to accommodate the population growth. We played catch up for many years because we were building next to nothing during the Great Recession. We were very, very underserved, underbuilt in this market. And now we've kind of caught up and are really now more responding to the population growth. And again, if population growth is a little bit lower, new building activity may potentially be a little bit lower.
The only thing I want to add is I'd like to see homes being built at the lower levels. The problem is the builders can't build those homes and make any money. So the builders go where they're making money, which is to move up and then, well above that. But that entry-level home is becoming a real problem. And the price appreciation rates, I think, Patty, you showed that in one of your slides, the housing price indexes, that the cheaper houses are going up more because there's no new supply of those homes. And if I could do one thing for Denver and one thing for Colorado, is somehow allow builders to make money building homes that cost less than, I don't know, 400,000 or 350 or whatever the magic number is.
Is there a reason we track lower than national right now, that our appreciation is slightly under the national number?
Well, I think it's mainly where we were coming from. Again, keep in mind that we have had many, many years in a row where our housing prices were increasing faster than the national average. So we had reached higher than the nation. And so it's kind of fun and games with numbers type of thing in terms of those percentages. But I think that it's just a matter of where we started from.
Okay.
It's Nicole, a funny way to think about it is the solution to high prices are high prices. And they can't keep going up. They got to sort of, they got to take a breather.
That's a great quote. And Elliot, this was asked of you, but I'm sure you've got information on as well, Patty. What year do you foresee Colorado home prices dropping? Or maybe do you?
Whoa, prices don't generally decline. I mean, the decline that we experienced in 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it was, that's a very nationwide, that's an incredibly unusual experience. So that one, a nationwide decline would only happen in some just wild, general, across the board, massive dislocation, terrible recession, awful thing. Very unlikely. Now, prices in any given state or region, they can certainly fall, and they have fallen in the past from time to time. They fall because of excess construction. New England had that in the late 1980s. There was massive construction there, much too much. Southern California had that as well. So you can get that, or you can get some like an energy, not anymore in Colorado, but an energy bust, which wrecked you back in the mid 80s. Now you're much more diversified. It would take much more than an energy bust to knock you out. But what if energy collapsed and technology and aerospace and throw in something else? And I'm making up a story, but it would take a lot. But it would take a lot to have a regional collapse in the Western Mountain States or something along those lines, part of the Intermountain. It's unlikely. Patty can talk about this too. It's more likely to see just crummy growth or flatness for a while. That's more likely, but the outright decline, it's very unusual.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, again, looking at it from a supply demand standpoint, which is, home prices are certainly influenced by supply and demand there. Again, from the demand side, I mean, we are still expecting that we will see population growth. So as you still have more people moving in, you put some of those demand pressures on. And again, from a supply side, even though we're building close to equilibrium, we are not in a position where we are significantly overbuilt. And that was certainly the cause of some of those things. Now, I mean, I don't want to imply that, the horror of horrors, what Elliot laid out as, something that could happen here. I'm not going to say that can't happen, but I think it's unlikely.
Right. I agree.
And we've talked a lot about the forbearance, and I ran the numbers at one point just based on the percentages and how few homes were in real trouble, especially here in Colorado, of turning that forbearance into a foreclosure situation. Do you see, and you had that slide kind of near the end of your presentation, Elliot, do you see the forbearance into foreclosure or into any kind of supply creating any kind of wave that I don't even know if we'll feel it? How do you think it'll kind of end?
I think you're right. It's hard to see just a mass of homes coming on the market suddenly. I don't know if Colorado is a I forgot the word for it. Certain states you can repossess the home quickly and put it back on the market. In states in the East Coast, often you have to wait a long time. It takes a year or 2 or 3 to get the home on the market. I'm not sure which one Colorado is. I would suspect you're probably the easier state because you're a Western state in general, but that's a generalization. There's no incentive for these people who are going to repossess the home to do something self-destructive. And demand is so strong. It's so powerful right now. This would be an opportune time to drop a couple homes on the market, actually. It would increase inventories. It might reduce the home price appreciation rates from 7 or 8 to 3 or 4. This wouldn't be all, I'm not encouraging it, don't get me wrong here. But if you add 500 homes here, 1,000 homes there, no one's even going to notice. This is a rounding error.
You know, we've been tracking the foreclosure activity in Metro Denver, and, you know, it's down by 80–90%, of course, you know, due to the moratoriums and that type of thing. I am concerned that people are going to freak out a little bit as we move into 2021 when they see those 80% increases in the numbers again. But again, keep in mind that, yeah, that it still is some very small increases, but foreclosure numbers are going up in 2021 compared to where they were in 2020. And but I don't see it as being detrimental, a detrimental type of increase to our marketplace.
I think Nicole may have.
Yep.
She's back.
Nicole's frozen.
Yeah. Maybe she'll try and log back in. I'm sorry, Patty, that you and I haven't argued more. I think that people would probably like it if the two economists.
You know,
You guys could fill the time by a little sparring, maybe.
well, you know, Elliot, great minds think alike. So hey, you know.
It's either good news or very bad news, right?
Right.
Hey guys, this is Nobu Hata, CEO of DMAR, chiming in here. I can actually chime in and ask you guys questions. We go back here. You guys hit a lot of the bigger questions that were asked. Somebody asked about demographics. There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years. And Elliot, as you know, when I was working at NAR, they were talking about millennials forever, since millennials were actual millennials, and now they're like old people now, and now we're talking about their kids. Here she comes. What do you think about demographics? How do you think they've changed? And does pricing in the Denver metro area, Patty, affect who is now buying, how long they're going to be there, and where they're going to be in 10 years, since so many of those younger folks are moving here? Elliot, we'll start with you.
So yeah, the demographics, as you said, the demographics are good. Those millennials that we've been talking about forever, up until relatively recently, were great multifam renters, right? They were driving multifam. And now it's their turn to age into home building, home ownership, and they'll help home building and realtors, everybody. And it's terrific news. No, it's unequivocally good news out there. The problem that Denver faces, I think, the most serious problem, long run problem you face, is the cost of housing. It's just expensive. Now, this is not a unique problem to Denver. It's literally across the West. There aren't very many cities out West, sort of. If you look out East, there are lots of places to live. Out West, the number of big cities is much more limited. So now we're all going to Boise and Sacramento, and these prices are going up crazy. In the East Coast, at least you can go to like second tier cities like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia to some extent, Cleveland, Detroit, Columbus, Indianapolis, but that's how the relief from the East Coast, they're moving inland. But in the West Coast, they've already been moving inland for quite some time in Boise and all these other cities. They're getting expensive. So it's a chronic problem. There's no acute moment when it becomes serious and bad and awful, but it slowly saps population growth because it's harder and harder to get any in-migration. Now, luckily for you, there's always California. So and they're even more expensive, but you know, that's your saving grace, if you will. But if I could do one thing, I'd try and get more affordable homes built somehow. Market priced homes, low end market priced homes. That's the demographic problem. California, as we know, this past year, 2020, lost population for the first time in maybe their history. And they're going to lose a congressional seat. And this is entirely due to home prices.
Patty, your thoughts?
So, I would also point out that, while right now a lot of the focus for the home buyers is on the millennial generation, keep in mind that the Gen Zs, the generation coming up after the millennials, is even larger. So I think that again, from a demographic standpoint, we are in a good position to keep that flow, to keep that demand going. And also, that's just who we know are here, who we expect to move in. We could get even greater pressures too from, if migration activity is even greater than what we would expect, because a lot of the people that move, it's in that early 20s something type of category, or the young adults when they come out here for school and decide they never want to leave type of deal.
I love that idea around the Gen Zers. I mean, they're kind of a different breed than the millennials. I have 3 of them, and 2 of them already own a home. So to see that they want to house hack, they want to own, they want to build, and they want to stabilize. So it's so cool. And of course, they've got, all this high technology. I mean, they were born with it. They're such a different generation. It's going to be incredibly fun to be in the housing market and to be into economics and education around watching this next generation thrive.
Yeah, make sure they can do everything on their phone.
Everything.
They can test drive the house. They can do everything. They can put their
Although
furniture in the house,
Shockingly, a lot of them are removing apps from their phone. Or at least my kids and their friends. So that's as far as that goes. So, couple questions on rental market. So, and Nobu, thank you. I don't know what happened to my internet, and so I apologize about that. What effect does all this have on the rental market? I have some ideas. I'm a huge investor in real estate. Where do you guys see that either rental incomes or opportunities or rental inventory being affected by what we've talked about today?
I'll go first, I guess. I'm bullish. The inventory shortage persists. We're still 5 million homes short. Housing is getting expensive. People have to live somewhere. So maybe the next 6 months, 12 months might be a little rugged because of evictions and people losing their jobs in the short run because of coronavirus. But once the COVID crisis ends and we go back to the new normal, whatever it is, we're going to be short houses again. And they got to live somewhere. So multifamily has to be the solution, or even renting of single family homes becomes a part of this. And that's part of the problem right now too. So many houses became single family rentals that the ownership opportunity inventory has declined. But I'm bullish on multifamily, again, with the 6-month, 12-month proviso.
Got it.
Yeah, I think that whole the single family rental market is one that I'm hearing more and more interest in around here. Certainly on the multifamily side, well, yes, I made the comment that I am seeing some people moving out of like the downtown Denver core because of COVID types of things. I don't think that's a trend that's going to continue. I think that there still is a lot of interest in being down in the middle of everything. And certainly here in the Metro Denver region in particular, where we are building out our whole mass transit system, our whole fast tracks line, that encourages more of that denser development along those lines. And I'm bullish on it too. I mean, we have seen, as I say here, more stability in the rental rate increases, which again, I view as positive rather than the 10%, 12% increases in rental rates that we were seeing to now see 3%-ish. I think is fabulous.
It's sustainable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think Colorado, and this might have been a question for Kelly, I'm not sure if she's still on with us. Do you think Colorado companies will need to start increasing salaries to match these home prices going up so much?
That's always been our concern about that differential, as I had talked about, between the Metro Denver prices and the national prices and the home appreciation rates and all. But again, this is all relative. if it's a company, if it's people that are moving from the East Coast or the West Coast, they are coming to Colorado and thinking, woohoo, I'm in heaven. It's harder to get people to move from Kansas City to Denver, or even these days from Chicago to Denver, because Denver's prices are tending to be higher than a lot of those other areas. So I think it all needs to be looked at on a relative basis, but in general, we're in the middle of the pack right now when it comes to the level of salary increases. That's actually down a little bit. Usually we have been one of the leaders, so I really don't know what's happening quite there, but generally companies, yes, we command a higher level of salary here given the cost of living.
And then probably one of our last questions, because we're clocking in on time. One of the questions was, how much will the reopening or the non-reopening, I guess for those companies that have closed down, of the entertainment affect Denver?
Well, I'm just excited to get back out there again. Woohoo! I think that, I think this, all right, as an economist, believe it or not, I am kind of an introverted type of person, but oh my gosh, I have discovered that I love being around people. And so I think that once we see that the ability to reopen, that it will be, I think people want to be safe. They're trying to be very good about it.
Yeah, they had a lot.
And also we've seen that incomes have been still maintaining. So we have the money that we can spend in entertainment out there. So I think that for any of the companies that are on the entertainment field, it's okay. Hang in there. We'll get back.
I fully concur. And the other thing is, I'm going to say something that's really not terribly nice, but bear with me here. Look, restaurants closed down. It's too bad. And restaurants open. The barriers to entry there are not immense. This isn't a huge technological Boeing that's going away, right? So, as the demand goes up, it may take us a little while to get there, but restaurants will come back. I mean, people are desperate. You hear these college kids that do these ravs, right? They find some place and they bring kegs and they have a party. Okay, we're older, we're a little more responsible, but the urge, the desire, the want to socialize is very powerful, even for, yes, me, yet another shocking economic introvert.
You can't be
Are you an introvert? You're not. No. You can't be.
Okay, maybe I'm lying.
Exactly. No, well, I'm going to end that. I'm going to end this with that, because it's always a pleasure, and to end on a laugh is a good sign. So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible time, so much opportunity. And I know that everybody on the webinar is going to be getting a copy of the slides. A ton of people asked that question. Your knowledge is immense and incredibly valuable. So thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Have a great year, everybody.
Good luck. Yep. Have a great year. Nobu and everybody else. Everybody, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you all hopefully next year in person.
Thank you.
Thank you, DMAR staff. This is fantastic.
Thank you all.
All right, bye-bye.